Every few years, a big graphics card company releases a new set of cards, and gamers get very excited. They watch videos, read articles, save money, and wait. This time, Nvidia came out with their 50 series cards. The ads were big. The promises were loud. People thought this was going to be the best generation of gaming graphics cards ever made. But when the cards actually came out, a lot of gamers felt let down. They felt tricked. And the reason was something called VRAM, specifically the fact that the main card for regular gamers, the RTX 5060 Ti, only came with 12GB of VRAM. That number sounds fine on the surface, but once people started looking closely, they realized it was a big problem. Let us start with the basics. What is VRAM? VRAM stands for Video Random Access Memory. Think of it like a small but very fast storage space that lives on your graphics card. When you play a game, your graphics card needs to hold a lot of information very close by so it can use it quickly. This information includes the textures you see on walls, the details on characters, the way light bounces around a room, and many other things that make a game look good. All of that gets stored in VRAM. The bigger and more detailed a game is, the more VRAM it needs. When a game runs out of VRAM, it has to borrow memory from elsewhere in your computer. That other memory is much slower. So the game starts to stutter, freeze for a second, or drop in quality. In bad cases, it can crash completely. Now here's the important part. Games have been needing more and more VRAM every year. A few years ago, 8GB was totally fine. Then games started getting bigger and more detailed, and 8GB started to feel tight. By 2024, some of the most popular and most beautiful games were already using close to 12GB or even more when played at high settings. So when Nvidia said the new RTX 5060 Ti would have 12GB, gamers and tech reviewers started asking questions. Is 12GB going to be enough? Is this card going to age well? And the answers they found were not good. Nvidia launched the 50 series with a lot of noise. They said the new cards were revolutionary. They talked about amazing new technology called DLSS 4. They showed off something called frame generation, which is a tool that creates extra frames in games to make everything look smoother. Their videos and announcements made it look like gaming was about to change forever. Some of what they said was true. The very expensive cards at the top of the lineup, like the RTX 5090 and RTX 5080, were genuinely fast and powerful. If you had a lot of money to spend, those cards were impressive, but most people do not have that kind of money. Most everyday gamers look at the mid-range cards. They want something that does a good job without breaking the bank. For years, Nvidia's answer to those buyers has been a card like the RTX 5060 Ti. It is the card that millions of regular gamers buy. It is the card that Nvidia markets as smart value. This is the card they gave only 12GB of VRAM. When people started testing this card with real games, the problems showed up quickly. Games at high resolution with detailed graphics were already using close to 12GB or going over it. That meant the card was already being pushed to its limit by games that existed right now at the time of launch. And everyone knows that games only get more demanding over time. If the card was already struggling with today's games, what would happen in 2 or 3 years when games looked even better and needed even more memory? The pricing added more frustration. Nvidia did offer a version of the same card with 16GB of VRAM, but that version cost a lot more money. So much more that it was priced almost as high as the RTX 5070, which is a better card in every way. So a gamer looking to buy was stuck in a bad place. The cheaper version did not have enough memory. The version with enough memory cost almost as much as an even better card. There was no good deal in sight. It felt like Nvidia had set a trap. People on gaming forums, YouTube channels, and review websites all started talking about this at the same time. The reaction was strong, and it was everywhere. Reviewers who normally praised Nvidia products were being honest about the problem. They showed charts and numbers. They showed which games were already hitting the 12GB limit. They explained that this card, if someone bought it today and used it for 4 or 5 years the way most gamers do, would feel very limited long before those years were up. One of the clearest points people made was about how long a graphics card needs to last. Most people who buy a graphics card do not replace it every year. That is just not realistic. For most budgets, people buy a card and use it for 3, 4, or 5 years. A card needs to hold up for all of that time, not just the first few months. So when you buy a card, you're not just asking whether it can run today's games. You are asking whether it will still run games well in 2028 or 2029. And here's the really important thing about VRAM. You cannot add more of it later. Unlike your computer's regular memory, which you can sometimes upgrade, the memory on a graphics card is fixed. It is built into the card and cannot be changed. Whatever amount it comes with is what you have forever. So if you buy a card with 12GB and games start needing 14 or 16 GB in a couple of years, there's nothing you can do. You either lower your settings, deal with worse performance, or buy a whole new card. For people who spent good money on what was supposed to be a capable card, that is a hard pill to swallow. To be fair to Nvidia, they did have reasons for making the choices they made. Making a graphics card is expensive. The fast memory Wi-Fi used in these cards costs a lot of money. Adding more of it to a card raises the price, and if the price goes up too much, fewer. People can afford to buy the card. Nvidia has to think about these things when they design a product. They cannot just put as much memory as possible on every card without thinking about what it does to the price. Nvidia also said that their new technology made 12GB go further than it used to. With DLSS 4 turned on, the graphics card does not have to work with the full size of the image all the time. It works with a smaller image and then makes it look bigger and sharper using smart software. This means the card uses less memory to produce a good-looking result. So in theory, 12GB with DLSS 4 is more effective than 12GB without it. These explanations are not completely wrong, but they have a serious problem. They only work if everything is set up exactly the way Nvidia wants it to be. DLSS has to be turned on. Frame generation has to be running. The game has to support these features. But not every game supports Nvidia's special tools. And not every gamer wants to use frame generation because it adds a tiny delay that can hurt your reaction time in fast and competitive games. The moment you step outside of Nvidia's preferred setup, the 12GB limit becomes a real wall again. A graphics card should let you play the way you want. It should not force you to rely on specific software features just to stay within its memory limits. If this was the first time Nvidia had done something like this, people might have given them more benefit of the doubt. But it was not the first time. Looking back at recent generations of Nvidia cards, you can see the same pattern happening again and again. A few years ago, the RTX 3080 launched with only 10GB of VRAM when many people felt it needed more. Then the RTX 4060 Ti came with only 8GB, which felt very low even when it launched. Every time, Nvidia gave the mainstream card less memory than people wanted, and while putting more memory on the more expensive versions. This is not a mistake, it is a plan. By giving the cheap version less memory, Nvidia makes you want to spend more money on the next version up. If 12GB feels limited, you will look at the 16GB version. If the 16GB version is priced close to a better card, you might just buy that better card instead. Either way, Nvidia makes more money. The amount of VRAM on each card is one of the main ways Nvidia pushes buyers to spend more. Once you understand this, the 12GB decision stops looking like a technical choice and starts looking like a business strategy. This kind of strategy is not unique to Nvidia. Many companies do similar things. But when it affects millions of everyday gamers who are spending real money on hardware they expect to last for years, it matters. People are not buying toys. They are making investments. They deserve honest products that serve their needs, not products designed to push them up a pricing ladder. What really hurt Nvidia's case was what their competitors were doing at the same time. AMD, the other big graphics card company, launched their new RX 9000 series cards around the same time. AMD put 16GB of VRAM on their mainstream cards and priced them in a range that regular gamers could actually afford. Intel had already shown with their Arc cards that 16GB was possible at mainstream prices. So Nvidia could not say that 16GB was too expensive or too hard to do. Other companies were doing it. Nvidia simply chose not to. This comparison changed the conversation in a very clear way. The question was no longer whether 16GB was possible. It clearly was. The question became why Nvidia chose 12GB when better options were available. And the answer that made the most sense to most people was that Nvidia was protecting its own pricing structure. More VRAM on the cheap card would make the expensive cards harder to sell, so the cheap card had to stay limited. Gamers noticed. Reviewers pointed it out directly. People who had been loyal Nvidia buyers for years started looking seriously at AMD cards for the first time. The trust that Nvidia had built up over years of being the top choice for gamers took a real hit. Not because their hardware was bad, but because their decisions felt like they were made for the company's benefit rather than the customer's benefit. The story of Nvidia's performance numbers also deserves attention. The big numbers that showed up in ads and many early reviews were based on using DLSS 4 in frames. Generation at the same time. These features are powerful tools that can make a game run much faster, but they are also extra software layers on top of the actual rendering. When reviewers tested the RTX 5060 Ti without these features, just running games the normal way, the improvement over the previous generation of cards was much smaller. In some cases, it was not very impressive at all. For people who play competitive games like shooting games, using frame generation is often not a good idea because of the small input delay it adds. For people who play games that do not support DLSS, the technology simply does not apply. For these gamers, the real performance gain of the 50 series was much more modest than the headline suggested. The impressive numbers were built on top of features that not everyone could or wanted to use. And even with those features running, the card still ran into memory problems in demanding games. That combination of issues made it very hard to recommend the card with confidence. So what should a regular gamer actually do when buying a graphics card? The lessons from the 12GB situation are pretty clear. First, always think about VRAM as one of the most important numbers on the box. Not because higher is always better, but because VRAM cannot be changed after purchase, and games always need more of it over time. A card with enough VRAM today might not have enough in 2 years. A card that is already tight on VRAM at launch will almost certainly feel very limited within a few years. Second, compare what competitors are offering before making a decision. AMD and Intel both make graphics cards now, and the competition between these companies has become real and meaningful. If one company is offering more memory at the same price, that is worth paying attention to. Brand loyalty is understandable, but it should not stop you from making the best choice for your money. Third, try not to buy a card right when it launches. GPU prices almost always fall after the first few months. The early launch price is usually the highest it will ever be. Waiting a little while often means you can get the same card for less money or a better card for the same money. This is especially true for mainstream cards, which tend to drop in price faster than the top-end models. Fourth, if the card with the right amount of VRAM is too expensive right now, consider buying a previous generation card at a discount. A card from one generation ago that has 16 GB of VRAM might serve you better for the next 4 years than a brand new card with 12 GB. Even if the older card is a little slower in raw performance, memory matters more over time than raw speed in many real gaming situations. The 12 GB VRAM issue is really about something bigger than just one number on one card. It is about whether companies are honest with their customers. It is about whether the products being sold to everyday people are designed to actually serve those people or just to make money in the short term. Nvidia made a choice. They put 12 GB on the mainstream card, knowing it was already close to its limits. They knew games were getting bigger. They knew what the competition was offering. They made that choice anyway. The gaming community responded in a way that should make every hardware company pay attention. People did not just complain randomly. They backed up their arguments with real numbers, real tests, and real comparisons. They explained clearly why 12 GB was not enough. They showed which games were already pushing past that limit. They talked about what the situation would look like in 2 or 3 years. It was one of the most organized and well-informed pushbacks the gaming hardware world had seen in a long time. Nvidia is still a powerful company, and they make hardware that many people will continue to buy. But the 50 series VRAM situation reminded everyone that branded names do not replace common sense. When you spend your hard-earned money on a graphics card, you deserve a product that will serve you well for years. 12 gigabytes of VRAM in 2025 on a card, meant to last until the end of the decade, was simply not that product. The numbers proved it, the games proved it, and the gamers who spoke up about it proved that the community is paying close attention. And that kind of attention is good for everyone in the long run.